let's skip the introduction
Yeah.
and let's go straight to a different name. Frank Miller.
Oh,
The Dark Knight
The Dark Knight Returns.
Returns.
Yeah.
You're starting to smile. Why is that?
That's funny because it's one of the comic book that changed my mind. When I was going to school, when I was about 15, 16, I had a friend who was working in a bookstore which has a big comic section. And until then, I only knew the comics from the library. And there he gave me the new stuff, the actual stuff. And when I meet him one day, he said, "Hey, this is a book, you have to read it." And I said, "A superhero comic, I'm not sure." He said, "Yeah, read it." And it was The Dark Knight Returns. And I read it, and it was mind-blowing because it changed my mind about superhero comics. It changed my mind about comics, what you can tell, that you can really write and draw such a grim, rough, dark story. And I thought, wow, this is not only comics are not only for funny stuff but also for deep dark feelings. And then I wanted to do the same, not superhero comics but the mixture. On the one hand humor, on the other hand emotional stories.
Before that, you didn't do anything with comics?
I drew a little, yes, I read them, I loved them, and I started drawing because, I was in school not the sporty one, but the one with the ability to draw, and so I did some sketches of my teachers and some little comic strips for the school magazine, but it wasn't my main thing. I was doing more music at that time and thought maybe one day I will be a musician. But then I started to find out that drawing and telling stories is really something fascinating for me, and I wanted to do, and so it changed over the years.
Was there a big comic scene around you or in Germany at all?
At that time the internet wasn't really working. So when I was a teenager, I always felt I'm the almost only person which is interested in comics. So some of my friends were too, but I'm the only artistic one. And when I met this guy in the bookstore, we had a connection and he opened my mind. But it was not really the city in Darmstadt, which is in the middle of Germany, close to Frankfurt. There wasn't something like a comic scene or so. No, I didn't know anybody doing comics when I was young.
How was it to get started making comics?
It was easy and hard at the same time. Because I didn't knew anybody who could help me, and easy because I had no limits. Nobody told me how to do it, and so I just started it and think, okay, if I want to make a comic, I have to do a book. Not just a strip or to copy something. No, I have to make a book. And so I started doing big stories with 60 pages or 48 pages, like Lucky Luke or Asterix or something like this. And so I thought, okay, this is a way to make comics, and then you can give it to an editor and they will print it. And this is exactly the way it happened.
Interesting to hear. I mean, I've only been learning about the German comic book scene, that there's a lot more going on than I thought. But then again, there are a lot of people that are into comics their entire life, and I'm sort of a late bloomer.
Yeah.
I only started about 5 years ago.
Okay.
So I have a lot of catching up to do, but I find it a very interesting journey, and especially I like to discover new books. And one of the books I discovered about a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
I have to show it, is this one.
That one.
And that was the first time I read work from you. But what I noticed is I also saw another book, Baron Munchausen.
Yeah.
And there I saw you wrote it. And this one you wrote it and drew it. So
Yes.
you are also a writer.
Yeah, kind of. Sometimes, if it's necessary. I'm only a comic artist who writes and draws most of his book by himself, is because I didn't found anybody who could help me. So I thought it was the only way to make comics. I have to find a story, write it, and draw it. And now, after the years, I know other people doing comics too. And the Munchausen story was an idea of a very good friend of mine, the comic artist Bernd Kissel from Germany. And we know each other since university. and he was doing animation and coming back to comics later. And when you do comics, you sit a long time alone in your studio, drawing.
Yeah.
And this is sometimes a little lonely, and it's good to have other people to share it. And if they are not in the same place, you talk on the phone.
Yeah.
And it's easy because when you're thinking of a story, you can't talk. But when you're inking or doing the colors, you have a lot of time to talk.
Yeah.
Not the most intensive talk because half of the brain is doing something else, but there's a half left. And if you find somebody who has also half a brain left, you can have interesting long chit chats. And in one of these chit chats with my friend Bernd, he told me he always wanted to do a Münchhausen comic. And then I said, yeah, why don't you do it? Because I think you know me, I love drawing, I can write stories, but it's not my main thing. And then I just said, have a brain. Yeah. I said, I can do it, it's easy.
Was it easy?
In the beginning, yeah, it's always easy in the beginning, and you during every comic book you go through phases or times when it's hard. Yeah, it's normal. But it was fun to start a book, and I knew I can write stuff I could never draw. I always feel like a limited artist. There are so much better drawers, people who can draw more stuff, more complicated stuff, better perspectives, better backgrounds than me. And I know Bernd is a very good background artist. He can do beautiful landscapes and machines and buildings and architecture and everything. And so I knew, okay, and can write everything in this book. There's a story about Münchhausen. He's coming in winter in an old windmill. In the inside and meeting, there's some guy who only talks in ice cubes. And I saw the picture before me. Okay, he's coming into the windmill. The shot is from the top through the wheels to the door. Okay. And I knew, okay, I don't have to draw it, but he can. And he loved to have such things to do.
Okay, yeah. They're making it a little hard for him.
Yeah, just find out what he's best at. So he has the abilities to do that. I'm not, so I would find for my stories a different solution. But to write something which really fits to a person, I think this is an important thing when you're a writer for other comic artists.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, now of course, I want to talk about the book that I had with me because that's what you wrote yourself.
Yeah.
And I was curious, why Don Quixote?
The first book I did was a Faust adaptation, and I found out with this. I did this because my German teacher at school didn't like my interpretation of the story. Okay. So I said, okay, I write my own Faust version, and I did. It was quite a success. As a book, and then I found out I like literature, and even the old one, and it's interesting for me to find out what these iconic characters we all know, what they would be, what do today, where would they fit in our society, what would change, why are they important to us still after, like Don Quixote, after 400 years. Yeah. And so I reread the book when I was in Spain, and then I found out, okay, this thing, which is Cervantes describing with Don Quixote. So his brain is getting dry because of too much books, and he's seeing things that are not existing. Yeah. This was very close to the illness my grandfather had. He had Alzheimer, and I thought, okay, maybe Cervantes was writing about Alzheimer, and he didn't know because it wasn't existing at that time. And if you look at the stories like this, you have a very different angle on the stories. And that is what I wanted to talk about. And this is why Don Quixote might be interesting for us today.
Okay. Oh, that's a very interesting take. Yeah, I never saw it that way. Of course, the idea about Alzheimer is obvious in the story, and I must say that made it a very touching, a very emotional story.
Yeah, this is what I mean. I like to tell stories that have emotions in there and touch you in some way. It doesn't. You have parts where you can laugh, but I also I always laugh better if I have something to cry about.
Our background is also very interesting, completely different from the
Completely.
literature.
Yes.
Not no? Oh.
Not that different, because we're talking about Spirou. I'm the first German guy who was allowed to do a Spirou adventure, and I wrote a story about Spirou in Berlin. So like when the wall was coming down, maybe Spirou was into that.
I have to show it to you,
Yeah.
because I also have it, this one.
And it was interesting to work with a figure like that, because it was not very different from working with Don Quixote or Faust or Münchhausen, because you have a classic character and you have to reinterpret what he's doing in your own voice. And so you have to how do you say it? You have an icon
Yeah.
and you have to put it down on the ground.
Yeah.
You don't have to hang it too high, because then you can't work. And so you have to take him down to look at him like a human, and then write your own story, and then it can work. So it's not that different from Don Quixote.
Okay, so you're having the same idea as with your other work, and you put that to Spirou in this case.
Yeah.
Very nice. But how do you get to write that story? I mean, do you just send a letter or an email to the publisher, or how do you do that?
It was magic. No. In 2018, there was the 80th anniversary of Spirou. And my comics are published in Germany at the same editor than Spirou, so for the German market. And some years before that, the Dupuis, the Belgian publisher, home publisher of Spirou, and the German publisher were talking together and said, "Hey, this anniversary is coming up. What are we going to do? Any ideas?" And they were talking, and then they thought, maybe we make a new adventure, a special Spirou book. And then they thought, okay, in which countries or which places Spirou hasn't been before? They thought, Germany. Yeah, there's QRN calls for Pretzelburg. Yeah, it's a little German, but it's not real German. And then they thought, Germany, Berlin, Spirou in Berlin. Wow, that's a good title. Let's make a book about this. We don't know the story, but this is a good idea. And so that we had only the title, and then the German, so people at Carlsen said, maybe if we make a story about Berlin, maybe it's possible to take not a French or Belgian artist who's looking from Brussels or Paris or Bordeaux to Berlin, but maybe we have somebody who's living in Berlin. He knows the city maybe a little different, or can tell a different story about that. And then they said this to Dupuis. They said, we don't know anybody in Germany. But then Carlsen, they said, but we know somebody. And they said, okay, you can do a pitch. If you have an idea, maybe you try it. We never done this before. We are a little skeptical if you find somebody who can do this job. But if you find somebody, we are open. I said, okay. And then Carlsen asked me, because we work together, they know I love Spirou, and they asked me, can you write a story for Spirou? And I said, yeah, sure. You don't say no.
I can imagine that.
You don't say no. I wasn't sure I could do it, but I was sure I have to try. I have to take the chance, and then I started to invent a story. At what time in which Berlin is Spirou coming to? What time does the story take place? And at the end I come to this result, showed it to Dupuis, and they said, okay, go for it.
So how much creative freedom did you have on this project?
Quite a lot, because they didn't really believe in the project. No, you mean I was the complete underdog, and the first idea was only to publish this in Germany for the German market. So they said, let's let him do it. If it's good, we do it too. If it's bullshit, it's only Germany. Okay. So they couldn't really lose anything, but they didn't it wasn't their high priority project, and so I could do what I want. I showed it in between, and they said okay, and then I could work on. So it was not that hard for me. Sometimes I thought, oh, okay. I was very unsure because I never did it before. I wanted to satisfy them. Yeah, I wanted that they say yes, that they like it, but I didn't know how to do it. So I just tried it to give my best. I thought it's maybe once in a lifetime chance. Yeah, maybe it's the only time in my life when I can draw a famous character like Spirou. And so I wanted to do the best album I can do.
My enemy, the announcer. And then here you are in Brussels, signing at the Dupuis stand with all these Spirou fans. How was that?
It was crazy. This is kind of a dream coming true. You know, when I started doing comics, I always dreamt of this. You know, being one of the guys doing comics, and now I'm here. It's a little unreal, but I was so happy people were coming.
And you were enjoying it?
Yes, I was.
That's good to see. Your face tells a lot. So yeah, it's great, and the artwork shows that it's really beautiful. So I haven't read it yet. I just got it today. So
okay.
I'm going to read it. I'm going to see how it goes, and I'm going to make a video about it.
Yes,
as I do with most comic books.
Yeah.
In part of my journey. But I was very happy that you came here, because that gave me an opportunity to ask you a few questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was very nice talking to you.
Oh, okay, and good luck with your future work.
Thank you, and auf Wiedersehen to all my friends in the Netherlands.